Heavenly Father, Lord God, we are so grateful for another opportunity to have what is going to be an important conversation today. We ask that you be in the midst of us, that you speak through us. It's in Jesus' name I pray this. Amen. Hello and welcome to another episode of What's the Message? I am your host, Claudia Allen, and of course, I am joined with none other than my co-host, the one and only Carmela Monk Crawford. How you doing this morning, Carmela?
Hey, Claudia, how are you doing? I'm good. And it's about to be even better
About to be
because
gooder than good, yeah.
drop some knowledge up in here. I am so excited. You know what? Before we talk, I was asking you about some of the things you have coming up. We got to make sure that we take a moment at the end of today's show just to kind of outline where people can catch you, where you're going to be dropping some knowledge later on this summer, right?
Oh, sure. Yeah,
Let's
most definitely.
remember to do that. Because I mean, some days I just have to, I have to bask in the beauty of the wisdom that just flows all around me. And so today is no exception, but always in your presence, Claudia, I think that we're learning something. And so this is going to be good.
Thank you so much, Carmela. I really appreciate that, man. Listen, today is, or this week really has been a very powerful one. On Monday, we celebrated the 100th anniversary of the Tulsa race massacre. And I'd love to just know how you're feeling, man. I know I felt extremely conflicted, celebrating Memorial Day and the Tulsa race massacre at the exact same time. I saw online on social media, everyone is waving the flag and talking about the troops and all, praise America. Contrasting that with the fact that Memorial Day was actually created by Black veterans who were not actually getting any of the financial or communal support for their contribution to our military forces. And then contrast that again with the fact that we're all kind of re-traumatizing ourselves, re-mourning over just this like horrific tragedy that took place in 1921. What are your thoughts? What have you been thinking this week?
Well, Claudia, I think what is interesting, what we are seeing is just a peeling back of all these layers. So George Floyd helped us tear off this Band-Aid. We're bleeding again. And it's necessary. Some air has got to get into this. And what we see is every time the air is trying to, mixing metaphors here, but every time we shine the light on this and people talk about it, people get shut down. That's what we saw with Hannah Nicole Jones.
Yeah.
And so we are in an important time of reckoning, not, and it's not just for white people. I think as a Black person, as an African-American, whenever I learned of Tulsa, the word riot was connected with it. It's Absolutely. Only now that even we are saying, wait a minute, that is not what happened. And so we are having to not only suffer with this trauma again, but also develop or get the tools to continue on in truth, to tell the right stories, and to reconcile that within ourselves, no matter what else happens beyond this. Now, you mentioned those stories about those veterans. I as we start to learn, I found my own ancestor who was an African-American veteran of the Civil War.
Wow.
And let me tell you, there was never once in my life that I went on any kind of history trip and saw anything about my people, didn't see a monument, or couldn't even imagine that I would see a Thomas Monk engraved into the bottom of a statue. And I'm telling you, as painful as this can be, it is also liberating and freeing to know that you had a part, and to tell the truth is something that we're all about. And so anyway, you asked me about my thoughts. I could talk a lot. And
no, I appreciate it, because I mean, this is the thing for me too, because for one, I don't even remember when I learned about the Tulsa massacre. But even as I was researching for our conversation today, you know, like I realized that it actually didn't even come to the national public eye until around 1995.
Right.
Then there was this kind of like 60 Minutes thing in 96. And it doesn't get into like Tulsa textbooks, let alone our textbooks, until around 2002.
Right.
And then we don't really start actually caring about it and really talking about it. And again, it's got this narrative of riot wrapped around it around 2018.
Yeah.
So it's like, I don't think people really understand that something that happened 100 years ago actually hasn't been spotlighted until 75 years after the incident itself. And I appreciate you bringing up the fact that, you know, it's about a whole quote unquote riot, you know, because I want us to just talk a little bit for those of our audience who might not be aware of this, and you're hearing about this for the first time in the news around the 100th anniversary. But one of the reasons why it's considered a riot is because it's suggested that there was a young Black boy who was in an elevator with a white woman. This white woman yells and, claims that she's been assaulted by this Black boy. And of course, the white men of the town find that to be grossly unacceptable. So he flees to Greenwood for sanctuary, because this is an all Black town. So he runs there and is like, okay, hey, maybe these people will be able to protect me. And basically these white men descend upon the town, and supposedly we don't know if Black people fired towards the white people who were coming into the town first, or if the white vigilantes fired first, supposedly. Further research I have found, though, there were several white clergymen who actually came out and wrote in newspapers talking about how the moment they actually found out that Blacks in Greenwood were purchasing weapons and storing ammunition. We're not even talking about the little boy in the elevator.
No.
They said when they found out that these Black people owned weapons and were storing ammunition, that they felt that they did not have the right to do that. That infuriated them. And so they went into the town. And then, of course, go ahead.
No, what I was going to say, these are recurring stories. You know, it's a profile and a pattern of a story. And there's an underlying pretext. Now, pretext is the same word we use when we talk about the cops stopping people for no reason. There's a pretext. There is an alternate story and narrative, and that stuff. This is still happening. And you know, there's so much. I was going to go somewhere else, but I know we got to.
Yeah. And so, I just want to give them the bare bones of the story. And then we're going to bring in our guests who will help us get into the nitty gritty details of things. But then 2 days.
Yes.
Not one, not just on May 31st for 2 hours or so did some white people come in to shoot up. For 2 days, approximately 18 hours straight, we had white people over the city in airplanes dropping bombs.
Yes.
We had vigilantes coming into the city, shooting it up, also bombing, burning things down. It was a whole wholesale destruction. But not just that, they were shooting just random Black people for no reason. They were rounding Black people up into a convention center. Literally, this was a wholesale attack on Black bodies and Black property. Mm-hmm. So when we talk about the Tulsa race massacre, we are not actually talking about a riot. We're not talking about some frustration where two parties are equally fighting one another. No, we are talking about how an entire race of people came in like a military force and descended upon an all-Black town and literally destroyed it to ashes.
Not just like a military force, deputized and empowered as a military force. And I'm sure our guests will talk about that as well, because that has its own implications. This was not just people doing this of their own volition. They were deputized, which means the government empowered and equipped them.
And so you guys, listen, we have many episodes. This is episode 60 for us. We've had some amazing guests on this podcast, but I think today is probably going to be one of our most important conversations. So right now, if you're watching us right now, I want you to click the share button. I want you to text somebody. If you're on YouTube, make sure you click that like button because we want as many people as possible to hear this information. And what I'm so excited about concerning today's conversation is that we're not going to talk about this is not going to be a rehashing of Gayle King's CBS venture on the massacre, but rather we are going to get into the details about what this city was before the massacre. And I'm so excited that we have Professor Julian B. Waddell. He is a thought leader in cybersecurity and a seasoned startup strategist with a vast array of experience in both fields. That is what most people know about him. But what you may not know is that he's a terrible singer and dancer, but that doesn't stop him from singing embarrassingly loud and at random while performing dance moves that look differently in his head than it does in real life. He is also a gifted storyteller with a passion for learning little known history facts. And this is what leads him to the project that he has produced just recently that we're going to get into today. His recent book, Tales from the Greenwood District, a peek into Black Wall Street before the massacre. In order to fulfill his passion for entrepreneurial endeavors, he stepped down as the Chief Information Security Officer at Oakwood University to focus on being a professor and the executive director of their entrepreneurship center, the OU Launchpad. And what makes Julian so good at what he does is that he is an empathetic critical thinking strategist who has 23 combined years of experience in information security, information technology, and business strategy. He has served as one of the lead technical specialists of the Data at Rest Security encryption initiative implemented by NASA to increase information security for their users, and his team received national recognition for their efforts. If you ever get an opportunity to meet Julian in person, either ask him to tell you about the epic project that he is currently taking on, or challenge him to a game of, I don't even know what that is, Julian. So maybe you can tell me about that when we come in. Brawlhalla. But today we are so excited to have you on the podcast and get into this project of yours that I know you've been working on for a significant amount of time. Julian, welcome to the podcast.
I am grateful to be here. Thank you for having me.
So, Julian, we wanted to give the people just kind of a brief overview of what happened in Tulsa, right? That what everyone across the country has been talking about over the last 2 days. But I love your book because you genuinely open it up, and one of the first words in bold, the author's note: this book is not about the Black Wall Street massacre. Why is this book not about the massacre?
Okay, so the way that I look at it, when you when you discuss the trauma that happened in any situation, not just in this situation, but when you think about things like all of the different lives that have been lost to police brutality and things of that nature, you basically make a footnote to the victim, basically defining their life based on that moment. And so when I looked at the Greenwood District massacre, I felt that just discussing that in and of itself does not explore who these people were. When you think about the thought, say their names, right?
Yeah.
Yes, you remember their names, but who were these people? What were their dreams? What were their aspirations? What did they really want to do? What were their goals? And so when I decided to explore this, and I had multiple reasons to, but the reason why I wanted to explore that specifically is I wanted to know what they thought, what they could have possibly been thinking, what were their dreams and what were their aspirations.
Yeah, I think that's amazing, because I think so often when we think about the trauma that has happened to our people, we oftentimes rest in that and only want to talk about the pain, but we don't actually want to give life and humanity to the people prior to their experience with racial violence and white terror. As I was looking at this book, you have packaged it in a really interesting way. We were talking about this a little bit before we started the live. And so there are some key artistic decisions that you made. And I would love for you to talk a little bit about that. Everything is black and white for sure. And you guys can see just a little bit. Julian, talk to us a little bit about why you designed this like this.
Okay, so one of the things I wanted to be able to do when I discuss it, if you decide to get the book, you'll see that the each of it is broken down into different stories. But specifically, if you look at the little breakdown around the picture, you'll see that the people are starting to disintegrate, and the symbolism behind that is to say that these stories are starting to be forgotten, that they're starting to disappear. And so in each of the pictures, you'll see this kind of disintegration effect to basically symbolize the disappearing of these tales, these histories, these people and what they were doing and what they wanted to do. Because if you notice in each of those pictures, you don't see sadness. Each of these individuals in these pictures, they're happy. They're living their life. It's and so one of the things that I wanted to show is that is disappearing, and what's being focused on is the destruction. I have a book that I read when I was doing my research by historian Scott Ellsworth. And I love this book, but if you look at the cover of the book, you see the Greenwood District basically in ashes. And that's what you see consistently. Whenever you saw any advertisement this week or anything about the different documentaries on the History Channel or on CNN, all of it was more so about the fact that it was destroyed. They didn't have any imagery on how it looked. And so in that focal point of it being destroyed, you can't see what was lost. All you can hear about is the fact that 35 city blocks were destroyed, or 300 people or more lost their lives, or 1,200 businesses and buildings were burned down. But how did they look? What were they? What condition were they in? And that's one of the things that, in order to actually discuss and talk about it and really deep dive into what the city actually was, you have to go into how it was founded, how it was developed, why it was developed, things of that nature.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Obviously, you are a business and entrepreneurial professor. What went into this Black Wall Street?
Okay, so let me tell you one particular thing. With it being Oklahoma, I think it was even before 1915, it produced 25%, if I'm not mistaken, of the oil of the nation at that time. And it got to the point where it was producing so much oil. That's at that point. I'm talking about before 1915, but it got to the point that it was producing so much oil that anybody that was coming in was just getting rich. There was a story, I can't remember her name, but it was a 12-year-old Black girl, and they found oil on her property, and she became a millionaire from that. It's literally, wow. it was like that. So if you take that into consideration, this area, Tulsa specifically, the Greenwood District, everything around that location was this oil, I think it was called the Glen Pool. And in the Glen Pool, they found this huge oil reserve. And from that, the city was made nearby. And so you're seeing all of these individuals coming there. Now, keep this in mind, when they got there, it was Native Americans. It was called Indian Territory first. And when they were there, they were given that land. And in the process of giving that land, they had slaves. Those slaves were also, because after the Civil War, they were eligible to receive land. So when you hear the discussion of we deserve our 40 acres and a mule, those individuals, those free slaves in Oklahoma of the Native Americans actually was able to obtain that. So people were coming there because of that. And then it's like there was an individual called E.P. McCabe. He pushed the fact that, African Americans should come to Oklahoma so we can make this a Black state. Because when he was pushing that, a lot of people didn't know about the oil. They were just saying we should go here because we are being moved here. Freed slaves are here. This is our Black Mecca, right? Yeah. But he's not the founder. The founder is this guy from Huntsville, Alabama.
What?
Yes, O.W. Gurley. He left. He went there. He was actually part of President Grover Cleveland's appointments. He was one of his appointments because, of course, if you go into Reconstruction, Black people were able to hold offices and things of that nature. So he went in, came to Oklahoma, eventually started the Greenwood district, and that's how that history started.
Wow, that's amazing. So how did you even find a lot of that history? Like one would assume that, any record of their life prior to this moment would have been destroyed in the massacre. So how'd you get this information?
So one of the things I started to do now is like, in order to get to that point, I have to dive a little bit into why I was even searching for it. So before I got even started, there were two reasons. Number one, my family history. So my family history, what I knew from my background was that my great-grandparents came from Oklahoma.
Oh, wow.
What I knew about that is that they left Oklahoma because something traumatic. I still am researching. So the whole process of me researching this is still continuous. But I wanted to know what was the traumatic reason why they left in the 20s. Now, here's the thing. Like what I did know, which was known information from my family, was they got to Oklahoma due to the Trail of Tears. That's how they got to Oklahoma. But I still, to this day, don't know why they left in the 20s. All I know that it was something that they didn't want to talk about, and it was traumatic. And so that led me to want to do research on what could have been traumatic during that time frame. And that led me to going and deep diving into the Tulsa Massacre. So in regards to doing research, I read from like leading historians, like I mentioned before, Scott Ellsworth. He's one of the lead historians that led the commission for the Tulsa Massacre. He actually had record, like he basically was able to talk to different individuals in the 80s that were still living. But the biggest thing that stood out to me, even outside of this, was basically just like understanding the society of that time. Not just Tulsa, not the Greenwood district, but Oklahoma, all the different things in regards to it being Indian territory and it gaining its statehood and things of that nature. That allowed me to learn everything and try to piece things together. And so, not to be too long-winded, but that combined with the fact that during that time frame was the Spanish flu, that's what led me to it. I literally typed in when I started my search was it the Spanish flu? So I looked up, did the Spanish flu impact people in Oklahoma? And then I found this news article in Tulsa, and it was talking about the fact that how the Spanish flu impacted so much, but in 1918. African Americans weren't impacted as hard as it was expected. All these other people were impacted. So I was thinking, okay, so I'm thinking this is 1918. They're saying African Americans weren't as impacted. African American veterans were coming back from World War I. then thinking about how they were feeling coming back and all those different things. They come back, you find this area, all these different residents outside were being hardly impacted by the effects of the Spanish flu, and this Black flourishing town was doing pretty good during 1918. And so that's when I started to really deep dive, like, okay, if they were doing good during this time frame when the Spanish flu was so bad, what could have happened? And then that's what led me from 1918 all the way into what happened in 1921. And if you think about it, the Spanish flu epidemic ended around the early 1921, 1920s area. So all of those layers were very, very connected.
It's interesting how your first introduction, or the first things that you come across, was the image of Black success and containment of a threat that was even killing and getting everybody else. It's such a different story than what we have seen and what we come across.
And if I can add a little bit more, it was part of the segregation of, okay, we're going to separate you. We're going to do this. And during this, they were flourishing. So you're separating, you're not allowing these individuals to go to your hospitals and be treated for this type of this disease, this flu, but we've created our own, and we were surviving. We were doing well in that area. And so I just found that interesting that even with no interjection from anyone else, they were able to flourish, build, and grow. And the reason why discussing before the massacre is so important is because of that little piece right there. Without it being touched, without it being impacted, without anything happening, even with all of these adversities, the Bloody Summer and all these different things that were happening across the United States, these individuals were flourishing, and this wasn't the only enclave like that. And they were able to grow and build despite all of the adversity. That when you see their city, their area being destroyed, you say, man, the discussion that you always hear, or you rarely hear about, well, they didn't lose much, they didn't do anything, or just discussing the destruction, you miss out on all these different things that they were able to derive and do despite all of the things that were being held against them or pushed against them.
That's really good. I think, Oklahoma most certainly was. I love that you bring that out. Oklahoma was like all Black town central. If you want to read another great work of fiction about an all Black town, I encourage you to read Toni Morrison's Paradise. But I mean, you had so many different historic all Black towns in Oklahoma that I think is so fascinating. In your book, you share a variety of tales. And are these tales fictional? Are they historical? Who are these people? You give them names. Are these names of real people? Did you find these people's names? What is this book compiled of?
So what I did was I took actual so all of the individuals that were created, but it's basically it is historical fiction. But what I did was I took individuals and that were historic, like O.W. Gurley, Obi Man, people that of that caliber. And I basically placed them to be able to tell their story as auxiliary characters. And that way you won't have to worry about me taking away from the actual history or basically adding or forgetting something. Because see, in the discussion of history, you'll see so many versions. But it's so what I try to do with this book is keep what the general standard of what happened there without trying to add my own little piece to what they actually did, and just had people that could have lived there so you can have an idea. Because see, the reason why that was so important is there's so much history missing in regards to the day-to-day life of an individual that lived there. So I wanted to give a little peek on how these people could have lived, what their dreams could have been, while being able to have a lens of the people that actually lived there without taking away from their history.
Can you give us a snapshot into just one of those? Because we would love for our audience to also be able to know what was one really great aspect about Greenwood prior to the massacre.
Okay, so in this particular thing, it's like you'll see the fact that they had doctors, engineers, all of these individuals there. And so what I wanted to be able to like paint, there's a story that I wrote in regards to a grandmother and her grandson. And so how I structure that story, it was meant to be exposition for giving a tour for the city. Right. So as the two characters are walking and just going about their day, they go by the shop, get ice cream, ginger snaps, things like that. Mm-hmm. You see that she's telling the grandson about all the great things of that city and saying, you're going to be great too. The reason why I felt that was important to convey is that outside of this, you always see the conversation being had about how we're coming from slavery, not giving any context of our heritage before then. It's like our imagery is attached to, we started from slavery, but we need to get over it. Mm-hmm. So what I wanted to be able to do is discuss that the son or the grandson, although the grandmother may have came from a time frame that dealt with slavery and things of that, they're within an environment that, for all intents and purposes, he should be able to grow from that. And he should be able to build what was built there. And he should be able to see the O.W. Gurleys or the J.B. Stratfords or the Williams family and basically say, man, that's going to be me one day. And so that's one particular story. Another story, not going too deep, but I'll talk about another unrelated individual that I have as a story person, is like the discussion is had with this one character where he's saying, it's like, man, this is the environment, this ideal for us. It's like it's fertile ground for us. And we can be able to actually build and do something that we want to do. And having that discussion, they run into a police officer. And the police officer happens to be a Black police officer. It's like, if you follow it history, I don't say it directly, but if you look up some of these names that are the real characters, that police officer is the officer, Black police officer that had to end up arresting Dick Rowland, the guy that historically is connected to the massacre. Yeah. And so I wanted to piece that in because a lot of people don't know that one of the officers that had to arrest Dick Rowland was Black. Mm-hmm. And wow. what a lot of people also don't know is all the things that were attacked. It's like, so I want to say this takes a little step. I'm going into the history a little bit more, but I want to say this. So what a lot of people don't discuss a lot is that this was worse than people imagine. So it's like, you think about stories like Emmett Till, where it says, okay, this white woman basically accused Emmett Till. It was like whistled at her, so on and so forth, and that led to that. But let me say this is different from what happened. What people don't really talk about is the fact that Dick Rowland actually worked in that area. That area, if you look at it on the map, was a white area. He was a shoe shiner. He got on the elevator because he needed to use the bathroom, and that was the path to the bathroom. The woman that was on the elevator, her name was Sarah Page. It is said that he actually tripped up and bumped into her, and that's what screamed, but it wasn't her that basically said that he attacked her. It was actually a clerk that heard it and said it. She didn't press charges. That's the reason why he was like, when he left because there was no charges pressed. She said that didn't happen. What really happened was a newspaper article called Nab Negro who assaulted it, and that's what pushed it. Yeah. They had to arrest him to protect him from being lynched because of the fact that they lynched a white person the year before. So the thought process was, if they're going to lynch a white person, they're going to lynch this Black person. So Absolutely. We're going to arrest him, this Black officer and this white officer who were partners. We're going to arrest him the next day in Greenwood. We're going to put it here, and we're going to make sure, it's like I forgot the sheriff's name, because there was two brackets of people. There were the people that said, okay, we want to destroy the city, and there's the other bracket of people who were like, we can't be seen looking stupid because they broke into our jailhouse before and they kidnapped the white person and lynched him. We can't have that happen again. So that's one of the things that I wanted to actually add and say that that's also a pivotal point.
Yeah, the unsubstantiated claim is also a recurring theme. The unsubstantiated claim that is either dropped or for whatever reason we find out years later there was nothing to it. That's a recurring trope. Let me ask you, because I love what you're saying here. We want to paint and we want to see the depth of the thriving. It's not surviving, and it's such a time in the country. We often talk at Message and with Oakwood, where you work right now, is that there were plenty of Black people at this time frame who were not doing well. But tell me, what is your definition of flourish, and can you compare that with the state of Black wealth today? Is there a way to adjust for time and inflation to give us a comparison?
I'm glad that you asked that. So let me tell you. So think of it along this line. So 1,200 plus businesses and residents were destroyed, right? 300 people killed, 35 city blocks, right? It was calculated, and this is not me going overboard, but it's calculated due to inflation. What was lost at that point by today's standard would be $200 million. $200 million.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and this is now I want to be clear. This is not me just basically just saying, oh man, this is my assumption. Mm-hmm. Now it's like I'm not just pulling this anywhere. There's something I forgot to mention in regards to my research. I came across this book. It was written by, I'm trying to remember her name, Mary E. Jones Parrish. Mary Jones Parrish was a journalist. She self-published a book called Events of the Disaster, I believe that's the name of the book, but it was written in 1922. Mm-hmm. In that book, it had actual eyewitness accounts, and she was there. She saw it happen. She lived there. She was a writer. She actually had a building there. But what was so powerful about her is that she went to the people that survived and started asking questions to try to document it for the purpose of this. And what she did at the back of her book is she showed an actual breakdown of where everything was and what was the value at that time.
Wow.
So it didn't get all of it. It got a lot of it, but you see that value. So when I got that book, when I found that book, and I found, the funny thing is I had been searching forever. I found it by a fluke. It was literally not even called the name of it. It wasn't in bookstores. I couldn't find it anywhere.
Yeah.
I found it and on the internet in a forum.
Wow.
And so I looked over it. I did research on the person. I found the actual pictures. Like I looked all the way at the details to make sure that it was an actual viable resource. And once I started breaking everything down, I then looked at, they had in their libraries in Tulsa, they have a breakdown of it's kind of like, the word is slipping my mind right now, but it's kind of like the phone book of today. Mm-hmm. But they had it at that time, a directory of everything. So it's like I was comparing that to what she wrote, and you can see in that information the breakdown of how these businesses were. And so when you see this and you see the value that she put, and then you calculate for inflation, you can see why it would be worth that much. But see, here's the thing that people aren't understanding. We're saying it would be worth $200 million at that point. Like if we were to account for it from this point here, if it just stops in that bubble and apply it to now, this is what it'd be worth now. That's not taking into consideration if it was able to continue from 1921 to 2021. $200 million in and of itself is too little of a scale. This was an oil business. This is the very beginning when we're talking about the Model T and all these different things.
Yeah.
Think about what that city could have evolved into. This was a powerhouse financially, while we weren't at the phase of making the technological strides that we have turned into. Can you imagine what type of investments, what type of creations that we could have been able to see from the Greenwood district if it had been able to continue to obtain what it was developing.
Right. You know, we talked a moment before we started about the whole idea of entrepreneurial scars. You know what I mean? And the idea that, number one, we have to talk about the entrepreneurial scars. But before I get to that, you know, you've got the trauma of losing the community.
Yeah.
And that psychological idea that I know Claudia, I'm going over to Claudia to get this. I'm coming by Professor Waddell and I'm going to do that. And at the end of the day, when we have our whatever we're doing, all of the Black people, the people who are doing their own thing, we've lost that community, not to mention the wealth. So that if we were to add some kind of valuation, we have to talk about the generational cycle of that trauma being in the background. And as a Black person who's not even from Oklahoma, I'm trying to find out what is the entrepreneurial scars for Black people looking at Tulsa.
So great, Carmela.
Yes, I look at it like this because I mean I've said this earlier and I want to say this before. Tulsa was one of the most successful, but it was far from the only one.
Okay. Yeah.
Like literally, when you think about Black Wall Street, it's like if you type in Black Wall Street and search, yes, Tulsa will come up, but so will Durham, North Carolina.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you saw that there were different pockets of these type of successful Black economies throughout the United States.
Mm-hmm.
And they suffered not from segregation per se. They suffered because of the jealousy and the destruction from outside parties. And so when you think about entrepreneurial impact and the fact that the dollar was able to circulate within that environment continuously, it's like left alone, it showed this kind of camaraderie of like, we're going to support our own. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't one of those situations where you say, okay, another race could not come and be able to buy from us. Mm-hmm. It was just the fact that we weren't able to go out, so we built our own. And we created systems within ourselves to be able to continue to flourish despite anything that's holding us back. And because of that, that allowed entrepreneurial ventures to flourish. That allowed for situations to come out of Tulsa, which benefited the country as a whole. Again, like I said before, this is an oil town, but this is an oil town with oil derricks in the early 1900s. When we think about things in regards to the industrial age and the different technology changes, you have to think in order to be able to keep up with all of the necessities and needs, not only that, but World War I going into, let's say, it's like, of course, it's before, but you think about World War II, you have to think about the technology that would have had to be created. You would have to think about the minds that would have to go into making these things possible. It was like we are, the narrative is placed upon us that we didn't have a contribution in regards to our big enough impact to building this country. But you can see with us within the Greenwood district of what we built, you can see that impact just in that bubble. But it's like if you were to apply that across the country and see all the things, you can see the economic and entrepreneurial impact of how they made things, not just there, but across the United States, how they made things more efficient.
Yeah, I think that's
all the things how to get.
I think that's so great, Professor Waddell, particularly because, you know, in the same way you're thinking about Durham, North Carolina, you know, I'm thinking about Wilmington, Delaware. Yeah. And, you know, it's not just that there were pockets around the country where there were all Black towns or all Black villages, entities that were completely Black sufficient, but it's that those towns existed and then those towns were attacked. Yes. And so I think what's often not discussed, or, you know, one of the things that annoys me a lot when we have this conversation, you know, it's like, well, why don't Black people support Black owned businesses? And why don't Black people just circulate the dollar amongst themselves better? And, you know, we don't know how to create and blah, 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 blah.
That's it.
And why don't we establish, why don't we, become entrepreneurs anymore and things of this nature? And I really like the word that you use, Carmela, that entrepreneurial scar, because I genuinely do believe that that there are things within our DNA that we have both experienced, our elders and our ancestors have experienced, people in our family have experienced, but also, guys, trauma that we have watched.
Yes.
Like on a national scale at different points in time, we have watched white people destroy every single thing we build. And that sends a psychological message that says, if you build this, if you do this, it will be destroyed by white supremacists. And so I think like that's a message that I always want to kind of like share with my immigrant Caribbean African brothers and sisters who come and who don't understand. And then they'll say, well, why don't you guys just build your own thing and do your own thing? It's like, we have been building everything for 400 years and they're burning it down to the ground. Like that does something to a person, I feel like. And I feel like because we don't talk about Tulsa and we don't talk about Wilmington and we don't talk about any of these Black towns that were legitimately burnt to the ground, we don't have a full understanding of why we don't engage in this work in the way that people potentially want us to.
Yeah, that's so rich.
It's not funny, but the interesting thing that you'll see is that the narrative is always the first, like the type of narrative and how it comes out is always the first to be attacked. What you hear across the board is that we don't stick together. That's actually not true. Think about it, from us as a people. We, in regards to our support, is like you can see, it's like we have a code within ourselves of how we talk to each other. We are some of the most supportive people, but the narrative that gets most prevalence is we don't stick together. We're always against each other. You have to think about why is that a narrative that needs to be pushed to the forefront? Because every single time we are actually left to our own devices to be able to build, that is destroyed. That doesn't want to. That's not. We are constantly either talked about. The narratives are either we don't stick together, or we need to get over all the things that has happened to us and stop blaming. Basically, it's like. It's like we need to stop having this victim mentality. And so when you see those two things, we don't stick together. That's the reason why we can't go further, or we're always playing the victim. You see those two things, and that's why all of these other races are flourishing, and that's why you all aren't. But that's the farthest from the truth. When we stick together more than anybody.
Yep.
It's like when it comes to, like, think about it. It's like if you see somebody, it's like we have a sense of community. Our race has a sense of community that we would basically, everybody's our brother, like literally, like our sister. That's our thought process. That's the way that we talk. It's like think about it, like just me as a Black guy. I can't it's like it's second nature. I can't pass another Black guy without doing the head nod. I don't know. It's like it's a sense of community that's just ingrained in us.
And I hear you saying, Claudia, and both of you, Professor Waddell, you're both, talking about hitting really hard those wrong narratives. One, we don't stick together. 2, not good with money. 3, not successful or interested in. And 4, needing someone else to prop up the community financially and fiscally. Now, I want to ask you this, Professor, because I know we're winding down. And I just have to believe, when I was just thinking about a moment ago, when you're talking about the disintegration in your picture, I have to believe that the Lord spared those survivors who are well over 100 years old so that they could tell this story. I mean, isn't that amazing? It's not that we have come past and there's no one there left to tell the story. These people are 103, 107, and I remember. and sitting there in Congress so that they could testify. And I think this, this is a moment where people who are watching, we who are saying, maybe we need to shoot our people an email or something that says, I hope you will take a moment to listen to what they're saying. It is very important for you to acknowledge what has happened to this community and what the cycle is that comes from this. Tell me, what can we take from Greenwood? For me, Carmela, give me just an inoculation, a booster shot of entrepreneurial Greenwood that I can take to better me and my family and my community.
Well, one of the first things I would like to say in regards to just us in general is that we don't have to feel like it's impossible. It's like the barriers of entry to actually start and build something, they were successful despite all the things that were being held against them. And so from an entrepreneurial standpoint, it shows that entrepreneurship in itself, it's a journey. It's a series of peaks and valleys. And I think that by looking at the model of what was created in the Greenwood district, we as minorities, African Americans, we can actually go and say, you know what, this is very possible. I can create that. One of the things I'm plugging Oakwood's Entrepreneurship Center right now, but I was thinking when I worked with our team to develop the Entrepreneurship Center, I was wondering what would be the biggest support that would help us. And it's helping people at the idea stage. It's providing those support systems in place. And the reason why I'm mentioning that, and I'm correlating that with Greenwood, is like the way that the circulation of that dollar, it wasn't just the dollar that was important. It was the support systems that were in place.
Yeah.
In order to be a true entrepreneur and actually scale that, because if you think about going to the SBA or all these other business support, entrepreneurial supporting organizations, when you go there, they expect you to know everything. And so because it becomes daunting. It comes to the point where, man, I don't want to start this business because I don't know how to go anything, because the way the business development organizations are structured is you need to know all of these different things before you can even get started. So going back to what I'm saying here, one of the things that we're focusing on is if you have a support system around you of different organizations that you can rely on, or different people that are like-minded, that are developing businesses or have this entrepreneurial spirit. And that's what we've been across the board. It's like, no matter, it's like anybody that you know that in your family, there's someone in your family that has had a side hustle, that has done something entrepreneurial that we haven't historically considered that entrepreneurial. But truthfully, what is that? Those people are called micro entrepreneurs. And those micro entrepreneurs, they have something that's very, very important. They have that mindset that I don't have to build the next Facebook. I don't need to build the next Apple. I can cut hair. I can cook. I can do all these different things. And that's the entrepreneurial spirit that I feel that is at the core of what Tulsa was.
That's powerful.
The very last thing I want to say about that is that you have to keep in mind that with Oklahoma, Tulsa being an oil town, what was the actual entrepreneurial ventures that were created? It's like, it wasn't just the fact that they were engineers or doctors was there. They had to think of it along the line of, people are going to need a place to stay. People are going to need people to eat. I mean, not people to eat, but things to eat. We are going to need haircuts. People are going to need shoe shining. Dick Rowland's shoe shining. He was a micro entrepreneur. He didn't work for some corporation. When you think about Oakwood and Oakwood's history, think about Oakwood 1896. When they were created, they weren't created into learn, depart, to serve so you can get a job. All the people that was coming out of Oakwood in the early days of Oakwood, they were entrepreneurs.
That's right.
They had to be, because they weren't getting picked up in the different industries, so they had to create their own. The development of these trades, so on and so forth. So I can talk about that all day. But the point is, that's one of the things is like, having the entrepreneurial mindset is ingrained in our DNA. It's who we were from the very beginning, from once we got, like, before slavery and after slavery.
That's so good, man. You know, one of the, there's so much in this book. I really want to plug it again for everyone. Make sure we've got the link in the comments. Make sure you get your copy of Tales from the Greenwood District by Julian Waddell. You have a treat at the end of the book where there is a map of Greenwood Street Business District, Black Wall Street. I want to show that, and I'd love for you to just, in your final words, talk to us a little bit about this map, who made it, what went into it, why did you feel the need to kind of close the book with this particular image?
Okay, so I created the map, and I can tell you, I had to. It's like if I could have used or found another map, I would have done that. But I had to research, and I couldn't find how the Greenwood district looked. All the pictures that were out were things that had to do with the destruction. So what I ended up having to do was I found a old map aerial view of Tulsa from 1918 in the Library of Congress. So I took that map and I looked at the destruction pieces, I looked at the addresses, and then I overlaid that and where it was with that old 1918 map of the whole city. And I basically was able to piece together where everything was as best as I could. And what I did was I took that plus the book from Mary E. Jones Parrish, the information that she found and some things in the directory, and I was able to put businesses. And if you look at the back of the book, it's not just the map, there's also a sampling of the different businesses as well. So I did that to basically show a breakdown of what these businesses were, what were the buildings, and what were they worth at that time, and what is the calculation due to inflation now, what would it be worth now? So that's what I did with that. And I want to add one more thing. It's a small plug for people. For today, it's like, this is one of the things I wanted to say because I was on you all show today. I opened it up for the ebook to be downloadable for free today. So if you go on Amazon, you should be able to get the book for free if you want to get the ebook. Of course, I would love for you to purchase a physical copy, but if you want to just
from the entrepreneurial author here, my friends. Although I did get it for free, just like you just said, that was cool. But thank you. But I'm gonna go back and purchase. It's awesome.
Well, I appreciate it, but I wanted to make sure that it's like I feel like this is history that everybody needs to be able to see, and it's like that's why I wanted everybody to be able to read it, just for the fact that you can see a different imagery than our destruction or our enslavement or something of that nature. I wanted you to be able to experience Black joy.
All right. Yes.
Man, that Professor Waddell, we're so grateful. You know, everyone that's watching, you know, our hope here, you know, on What's the Message, you know, we try to, you know, first season, we want to find the hope in the headlines, right? I still think there's a little piece of that in me. But I think, you know, the message that we really want to send home with all of you is that entrepreneurship is at the core of our Blackness.
Yes.
And despite the fact that we have experienced so much trauma every single time we try to do that, you know, it goes back to an interview that we did with Professor Coretha Mitchell, where she talks about how racial trauma is inextricably linked to Black success. That's the argument of her entire book. And Tulsa is literally a result, a manifestation of that theory. But a Black man did this. So that means, like, let's put, you know, to action the very things that we're reading about, that we're talking about And so that's our encouragement to you today, is to invest in Black authors, invest in Black magazines, invest in Black writers, invest in Black businesses, invest in Black people. It's not just about finding a product that you like. It's about believing in a people and supporting a people. And that's what we want to encourage you to do. Let's not focus exclusively on the massacre, exclusively on the trauma. Let's read and engage in stories that talk about how we thrive and how we flourish outside of and apart from the violence of white people. Okay. So that's our message today. As always, it's a pleasure. Be sure to tune in next week with us. Next Thursday, 11 a.m., same time, same place, just a different conversation. If you're watching on YouTube right now, make sure that you click like. I need you to click subscribe right now. I see you. You're watching. Just click the like button and then click the subscribe button. The Lord will bless you, and he'll bless you real good. And then make sure that you like our Facebook page and follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Message1898. We've got so much content. We're still in the middle of our campaign. So if you see little animated threads going around, just to know and remember that the message is your superpower. We truly do believe that there are resources, information, tips, and stories that are going to bless the totality of your life, your spiritual life, your physical life, your mental and emotional life, just absolutely every aspect of your life, your relational life. And that's what makes Message Magazine your superpower. So make sure that you're getting your copy. And then also our latest issue, our May-June issue, is really dealing with confronting some of the most harmful things that can come when we are attached to Christianity. That's not to say that we are detaching from Christianity. We are strong believers in Christ and Christianity and the scriptures, but we also understand that some harm has been done. And we are so grateful to Jamar Tisby for writing an article for us, for featuring as the cover of this issue of the magazine. So make sure that you visit our website at www.messagemagazine.com and get your digital or print subscription today. Carmela?
Oh, that's beautiful. Everything about today was great, Claudia. I don't even want to let Dr. Waddell go. I don't want to let you go. This is awesome. I just want to say that this is the kind of information that I believe it is restorative, right in the heart. It is restorative to know this is who you are. This is who your people are. It's not what they've told you. And this is the flip side. I don't have anything else to say about that issue, but this is the crux of why we still do what we do. Because there's a different narrative that needs to be told. And it is enriching and supportive. I appreciate that. I guess we'll talk next week about what you're going. Oh, one person in the chat says, tell us the name of the book again. Tales from the Greenwood District.
Tales from the Greenwood District. Scroll up in the comment section, click on the Amazon link and get your copy today. To Carmela's question, listen here. Your girl is busy.
I know, Claudia.
And your girl is sleepy, okay? Now, the reason why is because I am preaching a 3-part series for Southeastern California Conference Camp Meeting, and then an 8-part series for Allegheny East.
Did you say 8?
Conference. I said 8.
The thing don't even go that long.
8 sermons for Allegheny East, 3 sermons for Southeastern California Conference. I'm so excited for both. The study and the writing for these has been fantastic. Going to be, finalizing some writing and recording today. But I'm really finalizing right now the Juneteenth, because Southeastern California Conference, those 3 sermons are going to take place over June 17, 18, and 19. And we are diving into Juneteenth. But what is Juneteenth to Black people when we are incarcerated? Right? I think, the whole idea of Juneteenth is that it's a celebration of the fact that there were some Black people who were not yet emancipated when Abraham Lincoln signed that declaration. And in other words, that means that we are not free until all of us are free.
That's it, Claudia.
And if that's the case, then all of us are not free right now. And there are over 3,000 people in prison on death row, according to EJI, that are innocent. Let alone the Black people who are in prison right now, who may have committed a crime, but it was a nonviolent crime. Maybe they committed a crime and they got their sentence is unjust in comparison to the crime itself. So in other words, we have thousands and millions of our people who are still enchained, who are still engaging in convict leasing type slave labor. So how can we celebrate Juneteenth if we all ain't free? That's really the question that I'm trying to ask and answer. And scripture actually has a lot more to say about what we should be doing for those and to those who are in prison than we oftentimes take a look at. So we're going to be looking at those scriptures that really talk about what it means to be in prison and what it means to take care of those who are in prison. So make sure you're watching Southeastern California Conference Camp Meeting.
I was just going to say that is so rich. And I know we're over time, but I'm going to tell you, we got a letter that I just got yesterday. I got a 10-page letter.
Mercy.
From a brother who is incarcerated.
Wow.
They were saying, listen, we can't have the same prison bans come into the prison right now because of COVID. But you know what they were doing? They are using Message Magazine as their talk/prayer/book group. And they're putting from each section in the magazine, because as we're saying, this is the kind of thing that builds back up. And you got to wonder why a man who is incarcerated cares that Donna Green Goodman has a recipe for vegan pepper steak. He said, I especially love that. And this is not the first time I've heard that from our incarcerated brothers. But my point is this, Claudia, we look at these holidays. This is not about the barbecue, people.
Come on.
There are people that we have to remember and that we have to work for and pray for and get in here and do the work.
And I'm sorry, we're holding you, Professor.
Oh, no, I'm loving this.
This is another thing I really want to drive home with you guys as well here. When you support Message Magazine, you allow us to keep circulating in prisons. Understand what you're doing. Listen here. When we talk about bettering people's lives, those who are incarcerated do not pay for any of our subscriptions.
No.
In order for that to be able to continue to happen, you've got to donate. You've got to support what we're doing here. You've got to see this as this is a media entity that is committed to doing social justice work, particularly as relates to those who are incarcerated and those who are coming out. That is where our heart is. That's what our passion is. We are invested in doing real criminal justice reform work and touching the hearts of the people who are touched by this system.
Yes.
So when you're supporting Message Magazine, you are supporting our work in that. I know sometimes you guys aren't aware of that, but I really appreciate you telling that story, Carmela, because I really think people need to know the impact that we're having on people in the prison system. That's the kind of work that we're doing. That's what you've got to know about when you watch every podcast and you share every podcast and you purchase every subscription. That's what you're supporting, guys. You're supporting prison ministry.
And on steroids, definitely.
On steroids. Well, guys, we'll see you next week. Next week, I'll tell you about the Allegheny East Conference sermons. All right. So make sure that you come back and we'll talk more with a new guest about even more ideas and stories and work that's being done that is critical to our people. As always, this is What's the Message. I'll see you next week.